The Ithrani candidate's chitinous plates clicked in a frantic, rattling rhythm. Trial chamber key lights ek dum se badline, safe se lail. Elimination mode. Mary Vane's any green se amber ka safar 0.3 seconds main kia. A needle-sharp barb buried itself in the human's forearm. Behind them, my own support limb buckled with a dry snap. Gemma didn't scream. She just looked at my collapsing frame. I've seen dozens of species face the Academy trials. But you'll want to hear how this one ended. Trust me on that. That same clinical, synthetic scent of adhesive. It had first reached my olfactory sensors 3 hours earlier, while Gemma sat in the orientation bay, winding a strip of white fabric around her left wrist. I am a provisional proctor candidate. My role was to observe, record, and remain professionally detached, which is difficult when your biological data is broadcast through your skin for the entire world to see. If I fail to record this trial accurately, my transfer to the research division will be revoked. My veins were currently a vibrant, pulsing amber. This was the first time a Fenoshi had ever been assigned to observe a restricted file, Homeworld cadet. Gemma did not look like a restricted file. She looked like someone who had missed a night of sleep and was deeply resentful about it. She wore a faded gray jumpsuit, a messy ponytail, and was currently chewing a piece of elastic polymer with rhythmic, grinding intensity. The human was unarmed. Well. She had a roll of adhesive fabric and a plastic container of garlic bread, both of which we would later learn were class 4 hazards. "What's your blood type?" she had asked me during the briefing. I did not understand the concept of typed slurry. She had simply sighed, a sound of escaping pressure, and muttered that we would figure it out later. Inside the induction bay, the first trial began. Test 1 was the atmospheric toxicity gauntlet. The air was thick with a concentrated oxidizer designed to trigger immediate evacuation protocols in 90% of known species, which to a Fenoshi is the equivalent of breathing liquid fire while your internal crystalline structures begin a low-frequency distress ringing. Gemma didn't move toward the exit. She tilted her head, sniffed the air like a predator identifying a meal, and kept walking. She reached the center of the chamber and simply waited for instructions. She was breathing poison as if it were a light summer breeze. I recorded the data, though I was certain my sensors were malfunctioning. A human's hemoglobin carries iron-bound oxygen at 98% saturation. They live in a permanent state of controlled oxidation. A low hum. Then nothing. Test 2 followed. Gravity escalation. The floor plates shifted, and the Vrelian candidate, a species evolved for high-mass environments, began to sag at 1.2 times standard gravity. At 1.5, his plates locked with a sickening metallic grind. He collapsed. At 2.8 times gravity, Gemma was jogging. I noticed a tiny, persistent scratch shaped like a crescent moon on the corner of my visor, and I found myself focusing on it rather than the fact that the human was currently performing a warm-up while the rest of the pod was being crushed. "This feels like leg day," Gemma said. She wasn't even breathing hard. Test 3 was the tactical decryption puzzle. It was a complex array of shifting variables designed to measure cognitive flexibility under stress, which is to say, a machine built to make students cry. The Academy average was 4 minutes. Gemma solved it in 11 seconds while checking her watch. My veins were amber, pulsing with a frequency that indicated high-level cognitive distress, but Gemma seemed more concerned with the fact that the chamber's humidity was making her ponytail itch. Then came the quarantine. A DH-12 protocol was triggered when the environmental sensors detected a volatile organic compound in Gemma's locker during the transition to Test 4. It turned out to be something called garlic bread. The automated security drones treated it like a bioweapon, surrounding the lockers with level 3 containment fields. Gemma just looked at the 3 armed robots and asked if they wanted a piece. They did not. The Vrelian cadet next to her actually retracted into his shell. I began to record her heart rate during the next phase, which was, the Ithrani candidate suddenly shrieked. It wasn't a testing sound. It was a dying sound. The chamber lights shifted to a blinding, jagged red, the color of a dying star. The Ithrani cadet's chitinous plates were vibrating with a terrifying frequency. Its venom sac had suffered a catastrophic structural failure, and in its panic, it had struck out. The barb meant for the trial's target buried itself deep in Gemma's forearm. My secondary support limb had already buckled under the sudden shift in floorplate tension, snapping with a sound that I will likely hear in my sleep for several cycles. While the board of examiners sat in a silence so profound I could hear the rhythmic squeak of a cleaning drone's wheel in the far hallway, the medical analysis began to scroll across the main screen. Gemma was already moving. She ignored the venom dripping from her own skin, using her medical tape to splint my limb before kneeling over the Ithrani. The realization that the iron-based hemoglobin in her blood, a substance so toxic it would seize the neural pathways of half the known species in the sector, was currently being used as a makeshift clotting agent for a classmate did not seem to bother Gemma as she asked if anyone had any spare water. She shrugged. So she's just standing there while the board is having a collective cardiac arrest and I realize she's looking for a vending machine. The OSIC cadet in the neighboring pod recorded the entire sequence, his silicon shell rattling with a resonance I've only heard during orbital bombardments. The data revealed she breathed an oxidizer that corrodes Fenoshi transport hulls. Her stomach acid was an industrial solvent. Her blood was a toxic soup of heavy metals. And she was using that toxicity to keep a classmate from bleeding out on the trial floor. The roll of medical tape now resides in the Academy's central archive, reclassified as a multi-application Deathworld bonding agent. Its presence has forced a rewrite of the entire first aid curriculum. I visited it yesterday, watching the way the light caught the frayed edges of the fabric. It was a primitive tool, yet it carried the weight of something much larger. "You're applying for the Species Aid track, aren't you?" I asked Gemma during the final briefing. She looked at the paperwork, her face unreadable. "Someone has to keep you guys in one piece." A single strip of white tape, stained with the dust of the trial floor, resting under a spotlight.